Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to look at the servlet context object. So we're not going to look at this in too much depth, but it's useful to at least know about this. So we'll take a quick look. Now we've already seen the session object that maintains shared data between sessions, and we've looked at beans that have application scope, where a bean with application scope is shared between all browsers in effect. It's shared for the whole, it's valid for the whole application. So you could use a application scope bean to implement a hit counter, for example, although of course when you shut your application down, when you restarted Tomcat, you'd lose the value of it. And you might wonder if there's a corresponding object that you can use, an application-wide object in servlets, or that you can use in your JSPs without using beans. And the answer is yes. There is a servlet context object that is valid across sessions, so all the users see the same object. And we're just going to take a quick look here at that, just at a quick example. So the request object here, I've created a new servlet in a new project here, and the servlet's called controller. So the request object has a method called get. Actually, sorry, it's not a request object. It's just a method directly of HTTP servlet itself. There's a method called get servlet context, and we've actually used this before to do forwards, because you can say get servlet context dot get request dispatcher, and that gets you a request dispatcher that you can use to forward on the server side to other pages. But we're going to use a couple of different methods of that here. Now this returns a servlet context object, so I'm going to say servlet context context equals get servlet context. Now this has it's got a whole bunch of useful methods. You can use it for retrieving startup parameters from your application server XML, and you can use it for doing logging and all kinds of stuff. But in this series of tutorials I want to just cover the essentials, the stuff that you really need to know, so that you've basically got a way that you can make complete web applications, rather than covering every single thing that you can potentially do. So in that spirit, here I'm just going to show you the get attribute and set attribute methods of context, which are all you absolutely really need. So I'm going to say here context.get attribute, and then this is exactly like request.get attribute really, except that it's valid for the context, the whole application. And I'm going to get an attribute here called hits, and let's imagine that we want to implement a hit counter for this page. And of course it doesn't matter who goes to that page, we want each request to increment the same counter. So I'll say here integer hits equals, and we'll cast the return value to an integer and get the attribute hits. And I'll say if hits equals null, then clearly we haven't set that attribute yet, so I'll say hits equals 0. And if it's not null, I'll say else hits plus, just increment hits. And then I'm going to set that back in the servlet context, so I'll say context.set attribute, and I'll call the attribute hits again, and just supply that integer right there. Now you could also deal with the context in the init method if you had one. We haven't got one here, but here, because I want to count each request, each get request, I'm going to do the hit counting right here. So now if I run this, actually let's also output that value. So let's go here and say let's say print writer out equals response.get writer. I think I have that response I spelt it wrong actually, response.getWriter, and let's say that we just write out the number of hits there. So I won't bother here with any HTML tags. I just want to demonstrate this in the simplest way possible. So let's say hits, and let's add on the number of hits that I've got there. So now if I run this, then we're going to see, hopefully on the page, it's going to say hits is 0, and if I refresh the page, it's going to increment the number of hits. And of course, if I copy this, I could be another user in a different part of the world with a different browser. But here I'll just go to a different browser on my own machine, and I go to there. You see it's got the number of hits, and I can increment it here, and so now it's at 9. And if we go back to the Eclipse browser and refresh this, now it's at 10. So it's shared between the application, for the whole application, and shared between different sessions. But if I, let's say I run this again, thereby restarting the servlet, then it's going to go back, normally we expect, to 0, so let's go to this URL. And I don't think actually that restarted. Let's restart this here. So restart Tomcat and start it up again, and let's go to this page again, and where are we? Whoops, so I think I clicked run twice. Let's see if it's doing anything. I'm not sure actually. Let's select controller.java, try once more, click finish. There we go, so hits is back to 0 because I restarted Tomcat and it's forgotten the number of hits. And if you want to increment, if you want to save the number of hits between restarts of your application server, which of course you normally would do, then you need some form of persistence. And there's a whole load of different ways that you could do this, but we're going to start looking soon now at databases, because of course if you connect to a database, that provides you with a very nice way of maintaining whatever data you like between runs of your application. So that's it for this tutorial, and join me again next time, and until then, happy coding.